3 weightlifters, 3 separate countries of origin, 3 superstars, 23 world records, 8 Olympic medals, 6 of them gold. So how did Valerios Leonidis, born in Russia, Kakhiashvili, born in Georgia, and Pyrros Dimas, born in Albania, all end up competing together to form the Greek Dream Team? A team so strong that it rivals, at least in potency if not sheer size, the multi-decade-long teams of the Soviet Union, Bulgaria, and China. Simply put, out of the ashes of a collapsing superpower in the Soviet Union rose a fiery Greek phoenix. To understand how Christos Yakovou, the head coach of Greek weightlifting throughout the 90s and into the 2000s, managed to pull this off, to understand how Leonidis Valerios would defeat Naim Suleimanoglu, to understand how Kakhiashvili would win 3 consecutive Olympic Games and defeat the Soviet powers, and to understand how Dimas would become the most decorated Olympic weightlifter ever, we need to go back to the start. Valerios Leonidis, the oldest of the trio, was born in 1966 under the name Valeri Leonov to a Pontic Greek family, a group of ethnic Greeks who have traditionally lived on the shores of the Black Sea. Indeed, Valerios was born in Essentuki, Russia, a small city in the shadow of Mount Elbrus, not far from the Black Sea. Also bordering the Black Sea in Tiskanwali, Georgia, or more accurately, the Georgian Soviet Socialist Republic, one of the Soviet Union's many republics, born in 1969 was Akakios, or Kakhiashvili. His mother was Greek and his father was Georgian, hence his strong association with Georgia and his current role in Team Georgia alongside Georgi Asinidze and Lasha Talakadze. And the youngest of them all, the most famous weightlifter ever, Pyrros Dimas, born in 1971 in Himara, a bilingual, predominantly ethnic Greek region in southern Albania, to ethnic Greek parents. And so all 3 had some level of connection to Greece, yet none were able to compete for Greece due to political reasons. Valerios was constrained within the confines of the Soviet Union, who acquired him as an athlete in their national weightlifting team in 1982. Kakhi, who would have preferred to compete for Georgia most of all, was also bound by the, at the time, collapsing Soviet Union, forced to compete for the, in hindsight perhaps ironically named, Unified Team, a team made up of former countries from within the Soviet Union, minus the Baltic states, as they made their Olympic debuts as independent countries. Examples of some of the modern weightlifting superpowers within this unified team are Armenia, Belarus, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Russia, Ukraine, Uzbekistan. And then finally Dimas, who fought against the political situation in the People's Republic of Albania, which prohibited him from leaving the country. Each got into weightlifting in their own way. Let's start with Kakhiashvili. At the age of 13, having played many sports, Kakhi tasted his first weightlifting success, winning his school's athletic competition. A year later, he had moved from being the best in the school to winning the Soviet Students' Athletics title. Little is known of Kakhi's teenage years and early development within the sport. However, we do know that his progress was rapid. It's worth taking a moment to mention also that Kakhi has the highest Sinclair in the Greek Dream Team, ranking at number 18 of all time, 16 places above number 36 ranked Pyrros Dimas, and 50 places above 68th placed Valerios Leonidis. Kakhi's progress was fast, as he won the USSR Cup, though the civil war acted to slow him down. Violence in his hometown of Tiskanwali pressured Kakhi to move to Tbilisi, Georgia. Whilst competing there, he won the 1989 Friendship Cup. His talent, while not impressive enough to have been selected by the Soviet Union for the 1988 Seoul Olympics, was enough to require his moving from Tbilisi, Georgia to Rostov, Russia, where he would continue to improve, winning the 1992 Friendship Cup as well as the 91 USSR Cup with his best total to date, 405 kilos made up of a 180 kilo snatch and a 225 kilo clean and jerk. Within the Soviet Union, Kakhi was earning a reputation for his robotic mannerisms and timing, emotionlessly approaching the platform and waiting with his hands on the barbell, not glancing at the countdown clock, pulling off the floor with just 1 second to go, as though his whole life had been counting down simultaneously yet individually to all of these moments. The story of Pyrros Dimas in many ways embodies Greek mythology, though his story originates in South Albania, which at the time, like many parts of the world, was under communist rule and aligned to the Soviet Union. Information and the media were tightly controlled, and anything that entered or exited the country was to some degree manipulated or doctored to the communist end. In 1978, on a hot day in April, Pyrros Dimas was walking home from school, hungry. To satisfy his hunger, he climbed an apple tree whose owner was, to Pyrrhos' knowledge, absent from the scene. But unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately for Pyrrhos, the man caught him in the act, yelling at him, chasing him down the road on his bike, eventually catching 7-year-old Pyrros Dimas. But as it turned out, the owner of the tree was a weightlifting coach, and impressed by the physique and strength of the 7-year-old Pyrrhos, wanted to recruit him. So, with a rather generous dash of serendipity, Pyrros Dimas discovered weightlifting in the flimsiest of ways. On his first visit to the gym, he squatted 55 kilos, incredible for a 7-year-old, and he fell in love with the sport, quickly falling into a pattern of turning up to the gym an hour earlier than the rest, and leaving an hour later to watch the older kids train. For those first 10 years, Pyrrhos trained every single day, and at the age of 14 he moved school and transitioned to double-day training, describing this style as being very Chinese and Russian in nature, building a large base made up from multiple repetitions up to, but barely past, 80%. Without this base of training, he admits that he would never have been ready for what was to come years later, under the Greek coach Pyrros Dimas. At 17 in 1988, he won the national championships of Albania, and heavily inspired by the exceptional career of the Soviet Union's Jurek Vardanyan, he turned it up a notch. He ate well, ended any semblance of a social life, and progressed. At this point, Pyrrhos was still competing for Albania. He competed at the 1989 World Championships and the 1990 European Championships under his Albanian name, Pyrros Dimas. As mentioned before, other than for athletic reasons, and even then under the strict control of the authorities, Albanians were not allowed to leave the country, including Pyrrhos. However, in 1991, under the guise of needing surgery elsewhere, Pyrrhos was able to escape, gaining his Greek citizenship in time for the 1992 Olympic Games in Barcelona. His family, however, had not yet been able to leave. But it was still 1991 at this point, and so while in Greece, Dimas met his new coach, Christos Yakovou, and Valerios Leonidis. It was here that Dimas would discover the Bulgarian system. In essence, multiple maximum effort singles per exercise, multiple exercises per session, multiple sessions per day. All highly specific movements. And more on that later. And so Dimas headed for the 1992 Barcelona Olympic Games. Now, I was fortunate enough to interview Valerios Leonidis a few years ago, around the time of the release of my first book, The Greatest Weightlifters of All Time, in which you can read about all three of these athletes in much greater detail, along with the stories and careers of 67 others. The story that you're hearing now comes directly from him. Valerios Leonidis is an athlete whose career was overshadowed by Pocket Hercules, the greatest weightlifter ever, who pipped Valerios at the post of almost every competition. Though Valerios did beat him eventually, setting 5 world records along the way, he only won gold in a major outside of the Soviet Union competition once in his career, taking silver behind Naim at 2 World Championships, 3 European Championships, and 1 Olympic Games. Without Naim, Valerios would be more readily recognized as one of the greatest ever, almost like an even better version of what Gormanasian is to Lasha Talkhadze. A very quick interjection into this documentary. Weightlifting House has once again collaborated with Bruce Clemens, a man who documented much of the 70s, 80s and 90s, to bring you these exclusive Dimas and Kakhi posters featuring Dimas's 180 kilo snatch world record and Kakhi's long-standing 188 kilo snatch world record. Available at weightliftinghouse.com, links in description. Valerios took up the sport much later than Kakhi or Dimas at the age of 15. He did, however, have a strong athletic base, having competed in karate and gymnastics prior. Gymnastics, according to him, helped very much with the speed with which he made progress in weightlifting, and some progress he did make. After 2 years of weightlifting at the age of 17, he made the junior national team of the Soviet Union. A year after that, in 1984, and he was competing internationally as a junior weightlifter, travelling around the world. Progress was swift, and in '86, at the age of 20, Valerios won the Spartakiad, an enormous and highly respected Soviet competition, described by him as a small Olympics of the Soviet Union. There, in the 60 kilo category, he snatched 122.5 kilos and clean and jerked 160 kilos for a 282.5 kilo total. He'd done all of this after just 4 years in the sport. He eventually became one of only 7 athletes ever to win 2 Spartakiads, winning again at the next in 1990 with a 130 kilo snatch and a 170 kilo clean and jerk, his first ever 300 kilo total. Along with his strong gymnastics foundations, another contributor to his fast climb was his early focus on technique. His Greek uncle, who also lived within the USSR, treated technique as the most important thing. In fact, his 3 pillars of training were technique, and he created exercises to improve movement, repetitions below 80%, and frequent attempts at the maximum. The push press, for example, is not just to be strong, it is to perfect the dip and drive. And so though he didn't quite have Yuriy Vardanyan levels of efficiency, he did tell me that prior to the 1996 Olympic Games, where he set a world record, his best front squat was 200 kilos. Yet he managed 187.5 kilos in the clean and jerk. While competing in the Soviet Union as a senior weightlifter, Valerios met the junior Kakhiashvili. They trained together, went on training camps and to competitions together, and became, and still are, good friends. Cue the 1992 Olympics. Dimas was now safely with Greece, and after the fall of the Soviet Union, Valerios too returned to Greece, with Kakhi competing for the unified team. The greatest story of Kakhi's career, in fact arguably the greatest story in weightlifting, certainly the biggest FU and middle finger in weightlifting ever, comes from the 1992 Olympic Games in Barcelona. The Soviet Union was crumbling, and so Kakhi competed for the unified team. Head coach at the time, at least of his 90 kilo category, was Vasily Alexiev, the 8-time world champion, 2-time Olympic champion, and breaker of 80, yes 80, world records from the Soviet Union. Competing alongside Kakhi for the same team, though more favourably in Alexiev's eyes, was the Russian Sergei Sritsov. Sergei was a real Soviet to Alexiev, unlike the patriotic Georgian Kakhiashvili. And so with both Kakhi and Sritsov clearly the top 2 lifters in the category, Alexiev planned to ensure the gold would go to the Russian Sritsov and silver to the Georgian Kakhi, with gold and silver being earned to the unified team. Alexiev held Kakhi back in the snatch, opening him light and lowering his second and third attempts. Kakhi hit 170, 175 and 177.5. Sritsov, an incredible lifter in his own right, took proper attempts, hitting 177.5, 185 and 190, one of the greatest snatches of all time in that 90 kilo category. Remember, 4 years prior, aged just 19, Kakhi had snatched 180 kilos, so this 177.5 kilo third attempt was stifling. Entering the clean and jerks, and Kakhi was 12.5 kilos below Sritsov. The rest of the world didn't care, they only saw the unified team in at 1 and 2, but behind the curtain was the Georgian being held down by the Russian coach. In the clean and jerk, Sritsov opened at 217.5 kilos, Kakhi at 220 kilos. Sritsov missed 222.5 in his second, making it on his third, and so Kakhi was given 225 kilos on his second attempt, which did nothing for him, in many ways a preventative move by coach Alexiev. Sritsov on 412.5 kilo total, 10 kilos ahead of Kakhi and his one remaining lift. Only now, with one attempt remaining, did Alexiev relinquish the controlling reins on Kakhi, allowing him to choose his final attempt. Perhaps Alexiev thought it ridiculous to imagine that Kakhi would attempt 235 kilos, especially considering that he himself, the great Vasily Alexiev, had only managed 21 kilos more than that at a bodyweight not far off double of Kakhi's. Or perhaps he felt that he owed the Georgian, whom he had favoured less than the Russian Sritsov, a final chance at glory. We won't ever know. But whatever the motive, Kakhi, now cut loose of the chains of racial bias, ready to demonstrate the power of the Georgian people, clean and jerk 235 kilos, the heaviest over bodyweight clean and jerk of all time, 145.75 kilos over his own bodyweight. A world record clean and jerk, an Olympic record total, defeating Alexeyev and Sritsov, the final straw in the Soviet system. That single lift by Sinclair is the equivalent of 96 kilo Tian Tao hitting 242 kilos for an 11 kilo world record, or 81 kilo Lu Jiaojun hitting 224 kilos, a 17 kilo world record, or Lasha Tavakadze hitting 272 kilos, a 7 kilo world record. The icing on the cake to the story was that as Kakhi approached the podium, he paused, noticing the furiously gesturing Georgian delegates. He realized what was wrong. The Russian flag was being flown above him, and so he refused to step up to receive his gold. Eventually, the organisers swapped it for the Georgian flag to a loud cheer from his fellow countrymen, as he finally stepped up to the podium. Pyrros Dimas, too, competed at his first of 4 Olympic Games in 1992, this one in the 82.5 kilo category. Having hit 165 kilos in the snatch a few months prior, he opened with an easy 162.5 kilos, knowing that 167.5 would probably be enough to win. He missed it on his second, but made it on his third. After a 202.5 kilo opener in the clean and jerk, Pyrros was tied for first with Poland's Krzysztof Simon, who had lifted 165.205. Both at 370 kilos in the total, both missing their final lifts, both weighing 81.8 kilos. When the level of analysis was taken to the hundredths of a kilogram, it was found that Pyrros was the lighter of the two lifters, and so at 21 years of age, Pyrros was the Olympic champion. On his final attempt of the Games, he had yelled out "Gia ten Helada," or "for Greece," owing his performance and his free life to the country that had taken him in and granted him citizenship. This also gave birth to his nickname among the people of Greece, the Lion of Himara. Kakhi, having also won his first of 3 Olympic Games, left Russia and moved back home to Georgia. So how did this Georgian hero, now free to compete for the country he loved, end up joining Pyrros and Valerios and win the following 2 Olympic Games for Greece in 96 and 2000? The problem was Georgia's lack of provisions and support. Not enough food for the country's athletes. A quote from Kakhiashvili. "It was a hard time for Georgian athletics. There were no training facilities, none of the basic things you would need. I participated in all kinds of trainings and competitions under the Georgian flag, and I began losing games because of injuries and because I couldn't prepare properly. I realised I had to leave sports or find a way out of this situation." Athletic committees across the globe learned of Kakhi's difficulties, with many countries offering to host him as their own. Offers from Russia, Germany and Hungary were all eventually turned down. But finally, the committee president of the International Olympic Committee, who happened to be Greek, offered Kakhiashvili a place to live and train in Greece with all of his expenses paid. Having medalled a few times for Georgia in the years that followed the 92 Olympics, Kakhi finally moved to Greece in 1994, 2 years prior to winning his second Olympic gold medal. "It was tough," he said. "At one point I wanted to go back to Georgia. I was depressed. I'm glad I didn't though. I see now that I would have lost out on everything if I had left Greece. I won many competitions. I became a 2-time Olympic gold medal winner for them. I know that all these things wouldn't happen without this country, which loved me so much and took care of me. My success today is all thanks to Greece." And so the three trained together under the watchful eye of 3-time Olympian Christos Yakovou, who trained them hard. Together they became, at the time, the most dominant team in the world, the talents of the Soviet Union falling into one country. The training in Greece, however, differed tremendously from what they were all used to. According to Pyrros, it took him 4 years, from 1991 until 1995, to truly adapt to this new high-intensity, high-frequency, Bulgarian style of training. Having recently spoken to Christos Yakovu, I asked him to send me an example of their training. Unfortunately, he did. Breakfast was at around 7:30 am. 8 am was back squats, snatch, clean and jerk, front squats, all to max. After a long break, which included lunch at 1 p.m, they were back in for session 2 at 4 p.m. Snatches, clean and jerks, and snatches again. At 7:30 p.m, they ate dinner. 8 p.m. was their third and final session of the day. They would do either the snatch or clean and jerk, and then, once again, back squat. 4 heavy squat sessions a day. The variation came from switching between maximum lifts every day and then 85% on a few days sprinkled throughout training. The atmosphere in the training hall between these three was intense, quiet, and calm. Rarely did any of the athletes talk, though if they did, according to Dimas, it was Valerios who was cracking jokes. Valerios said that if the atmosphere in the gym wasn't good and that if the relationship between the athletes wasn't quite right, then they wouldn't possibly have been able to lift big weights. The three hit their best training lifts ever during this style of training. Valerios at 64 went 150-190, and at 69 he snatched 157.5 and clean and jerk 202.5 kilos. Pyrros hit 190 kilos in the snatch, 225 kilos in the clean and jerk, a 290 kilo front squat, and a 325 kilo back squat. And Kakhi, ever the quietest and most talented of them all, made astonishing lifts of 200 kilos in the snatch and 240 kilos in the clean and jerk. They all trained hard, taking on the world by storm. Between the 1994 and 1995 World Championships, they brought home to Greece 3 golds and 3 silvers. In 1996 at the Atlanta Games, Pyrros won gold again in the 83 kilo category with an incredible 180 snatch and a 213 kilo clean and jerk. Kakhi too won gold, snatching 185 kilos and once again clean and jerking the magical 235 kilos that he had made 4 years prior, defeating Anatoly Kropati of Kazakhstan. And Valerios battled it out with the greatest ever, Naim Suleimanoglu, in what was described as the greatest weightlifting battle ever. Though he would take the silver, he did push Naim more than any man ever had. The three continued to succeed. Valerios was a European champion, and Kakhi won the 1998 and 99 World Championships, even setting a new snatch world record in the new 94 kilo class at 188 kilos, the longest standing record in the new weight classes, lasting a constant onslaught until Surab Muradi took it in 2018. Dimas also persisted, also winning the 1998 World Championships. And in 2000 at the Sydney Olympics, Dimas and Kakhi joined the ranks of Naim Suleimanoglu, winning their 3rd Olympic Games. Dimas with a career-high 215 kilo clean and jerk, and Kakhi not even needing to take his final 2 attempts. As most of you know, they both competed in 2004, though neither managed to secure the gold. The Greek Dream Team is like something from Greek mythology. All three started in separate countries, all found their homes in Greece. Pyrros Dimas and Valerios Leonidis, who had always had dreams of Greece, were taken in and treated like gods from Olympus. Even Kakhi, whose love for Georgia had always remained, eventually came to love the country that had supported him. Greek citizens had their eyes full of tears when I was winning. It's impossible to forget these moments, Kakhiashvili said. I think this is the most an athlete can ever dream for. I feel the love of the people, both Georgian and Greek.